Today I want to share with you how to make natural food coloring, and I'll even show you how to make blue food coloring. And these are all made with easy to find ingredients at most grocery stores. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making things like bone broth, ferment, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel, and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Now, to make a natural food coloring that'll give you a red or pink color, you want to start with beets, and canned beets actually work really well for this. But you can also use fresh beets. If you have a fresh beet, you'll want to peel it, and then you'll want to cut it up and put it in about a half a cup of water and simmer it until it's soft. And then you'll want to use the beets or the cut up beet and the water that you cooked the beet in to proceed with our next step. Now, if you're using the canned beets, you'll just want to take out about 4 beets. You know, they're pretty standard size, they're usually pretty small. You just need about 4 of them and about a half a cup of the beet juice that's in the can. And then what we're going to do is just put them into a blender. You can use a blender to do this, you can use a food processor, you can use one of these like mini blenders, anything will work. Now you can certainly make a larger amount of this or even a smaller amount and just reduce the ingredients or increase the ingredients accordingly. But keep in mind that these natural food colorings last maybe about 2 months in your refrigerator. So if you think that you're going to need a lot of food coloring, certainly you can increase the amount. But usually this amount of the various ones we're going to be making today should be sufficient, you know, for when you're doing maybe holiday baking and whatnot. And so you'll know you'll have them on hand for about 2 months. After that, they start to degrade a little bit. Yes, they probably still work in some of your baking, you know, making icing for cookies and whatnot, but the color does start to degrade a little after about 2 months. And now we'll send these for a whirl. Now you want to pulverize those for maybe about 30 seconds to a minute. You just want to make sure that it's nice and smooth and that the beets have been completely pulverized. Then you're going to want to get a tight, nice mesh strainer like this, some kind of vessel. I've just got a bowl here. Use a large measuring cup, whatever you've got. And then you're just going to pour this through the strainer, the sieve, and work it through until all the liquid gets out into the bottom of the strainer, and there's just any little bits of pulp that may be left behind. Now initially this is going to be a little foamy because we did whirl it in the blender. But what's going to happen is the red color is going to kind of sink to the bottom, and then you're just going to have a little bit of foam on top, and then we'll just scoop that off with a spoon, and then we'll get ready to decant it. Now I wanted to make making these natural food colorings as easy as possible for everyone. But you can also do this if you have a freeze-dried beets. Now not everybody has those on hand, but if you do, you can pulverize those and just add them to water. And you can do that with any freeze-dried fruit you have. You can also do it with dehydrated fruit, but the freeze-dried works the best. So you could use dehydrated beets and get red food coloring. You could use dehydrated raspberries and get a red food coloring, although beets make a little bit of a richer red color. So there are options. And you may have seen the video where I dehydrated beets to make a beet powder. And you could use that to make red food coloring. But your freeze-dried fruits and vegetables really give you the richest colors when making natural food colorings. But I like just being able to use canned beets because that's such an easy thing to find. They're very inexpensive, and pretty much everybody can have them in their kitchen or will have them in their kitchen or find them at their local grocery store. Next, we're going to make yellow food coloring, and this is very easy. All you need to do is get a small saucepan with a half a cup of water in it, and then sprinkle into the water a teaspoon of turmeric powder. And then we're going to put this on the heat, and we're going to let this just simmer on a medium simmer for about 2 to 3 minutes, just for the turmeric powder to dissolve and become well incorporated with the water. Well, I simmered this for about 2 or 3 minutes, and it's a beautiful yellow color. I'll take a picture and overlay it so that you can see that up close. But that's it. You're all set. Now we'll just set this aside, let it cool before we decant it. Next, we're going to make purple food coloring. And for that, you're going to want to use blueberries. Yes, blueberries, but they make purple food coloring. Now for this process, frozen blueberries work the best because they have the deepest, richest color. But you can certainly use fresh blueberries as well. If you want to use fresh blueberries, what you'll want to do is take a ½ cup of blueberries and mix it with ½ cup of water and simmer it in a saucepan for a few minutes as you mash the berries down with like a potato masher or a wooden spoon, whatever you have. Just as I said, simmer it for a few minutes and then remove it from the heat, and then you'll proceed with the same steps that we're going to take. Now for the frozen blueberries, you're going to want a ½ cup, and just any kind of blender that you have, a regular blender, high-speed blender, food processor, anything will work. I'm just using this little kind of mini blender, and I'm just going to put these blueberries in here, and I'm going to add a third of a cup of water. Now if you're using fresh, as I said, you'll add a ½ cup because there'll be a little evaporation when you're simmering. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that third cup of water, and now we'll send these for a little whirl. So you just want to whirl them till everything's pureed. It takes about 30 seconds. And then we're going to, again, just like we did with the beets, we're going to pour this mixture of blueberries and water through a very fine mesh strainer. And then again, you're just going to let this drain through, making sure you keep all the solids retained in the strainer. And while we're doing this, I just want to mention diagnosing some problems that you may incur when you do this. If you find after you've strained this, if maybe you've gone back and forth a little too much and maybe some of the pureed fruit or vegetables has gotten into your mixture and you find that it's actually a little thick, you can just restrain it. That's no problem at all. And you just want to be gentle. And now you might get a little foam that'll occur on the top of the liquid that you've strained out. And again, before we decant it, we'll just sort of scoop a little bit of that foam off. I'll take a picture and I'll overlay it and show you, like with the beets where we had a little foam on top. And I just try to very gently with a spoon push it to one side and then scoop it out, and then it's no problem. Basically what you're looking for once you've strained out your liquid is that you have caught pretty much all the solids in your mesh strainer. And I'll take a close-up picture and overlay it so you can see what I'm talking about. But you'll see all the blueberry skins and a little bit of foam, and pretty much all of that should remain behind in your strainer. And as with the beets, anything that's left behind in your strainer doesn't need to be thrown out. You can easily scoop this with a spoon and put these are relatively small amounts, but you can put them into a little ice cube tray and freeze them, and then you can use them, in this case with the blueberries, maybe to throw into a smoothie. I guess you could throw the beet puree into a smoothie as well, or into a soup, something like that. So don't worry, you won't waste this. Now we're going to make green food coloring. And in the case of green food coloring, we're going to use spinach. And we're going to use fresh spinach, because I have found that fresh spinach gives you the brightest, greenest color. Now you can use frozen spinach, but the color will be a little deeper. So if you are looking for something that's a very deep green, frozen spinach may actually work very well for you. Now we've got a cup of fresh spinach here, and we're going to add in a ½ cup of water, and then what we're going to do is just simmer this for about 2 or 3 minutes just to get it softened, just to get the spinach softened. And we don't want to cover this, because just like whenever you make any kind of greens, and even including broccoli, whenever you cook them, if you put the lid on, they can get discolored very quickly. So we're just going to simmer this gently on a medium simmer for about 2 to 3 minutes to soften it, and we're going to keep it uncovered to really keep that nice green color. Well, I simmered the spinach just for a few minutes, and as you can see, it's very soft, but still retains a nice vibrant green color. I'll overlay a picture so that you can see this up closely. And I'm just going to let this cool for a few minutes, and then we're going to put it into our blender and send it for a whirl. And when you add your spinach into your blender, whatever type of blender you're using, you also want to include the water that you simmered the spinach in. Alrighty, now we'll send this for a whirl. Now we've got our spinach all pureed here. It took about 30 seconds in this little blender, but you just want to make sure that everything is completely chopped up, the stems and the leaves. And then again, just like with the others, we're going to gently let this drip down, and you're going to have some foam. You're going to have you'll have some foam that drips through there, but that's not a problem. And then you just want to do this very gently. If you notice, I've been using a little spoon to do this and not a spatula, because I don't want to encourage too much of these thicker solids. See, this is more of a puree, and we don't want the puree to go down into the liquid. We want to keep the puree behind in the mesh strainer. And this is like a great puree that you can put in, as I said, into an ice cube tray. You can save this for soup or for a smoothie if you like doing those green smoothies. Just let it drip a little more just to get most of the liquid out. Now I want to show you, because I took a picture and I'm going to overlay it so you can see the little bit of foam that has developed on top. And that's fine. That just happens, when we're whirling these things in the blender. You'll just take a spoon and you can easily move. I'll take another picture once I get it moved to the side and overlay it. And you're just going to work it over to the side, and then you can just easily scoop it off. See, I've got some foam on the spoon, and discard it, or even add it in with your puree, whatever you want to do. But it's very easy to move to the side and remove. Now to make blue food coloring, you're going to need 2 cups of sliced red cabbage. Now the first thing we need to do is take 1.5 cups of water and add that to our 2 cups of shredded cabbage, shredded red cabbage. And then we're going to put this on the heat, and we're going to bring this up to a simmer, and we're going to let this simmer for about 15 minutes. You want the cabbage to be very soft and the color of the water to have changed. Now after you've let this simmer on a medium heat for about 15 minutes or so, the cabbage will be very soft. I'll overlay a picture so that you can see exactly how this looks. The cabbage should, as I said, should be very soft, and the liquid should have evaporated considerably. We're going to have probably about 1/2 cup of the liquid. Then what we're going to do is just start transferring this. Be careful if you're doing this while it's still hot. And just transfer this into your sieve to collect this cabbage. Now we're not going to use this cabbage, but you can certainly save this and toss it with a little butter and eat it, or add it to a soup. You can do anything you want with that. And you just want to make sure you get out as much liquid as you can. Now, I want to say one thing. If you can see, this is a lovely lavender, sort of lavender purple color. And you might say, oh, I'll just use this for my purple food coloring. I don't need to make purple with blueberries. Don't be fooled by this lovely lavender color. The water that we've achieved from boiling these cabbage or simmering this red cabbage is very susceptible to color change. And that's why we're able to turn this into blue. And it can also be turned into somewhat of a reddish color as well, although the beets make a better red food coloring. However, if you think that you've got this wonderful purple food coloring and you go to use it in a recipe, it may change color on you. So just be aware of that. Now the next thing that you want to do is get some baking soda and just measure out 1/4 teaspoon, because you don't want to use any more than 1/4 teaspoon for this amount of liquid, because what would happen is this would start to take on somewhat of a salty taste, the taste that baking soda tends to have, and you wouldn't want that to have an effect on your recipe, especially if you were using a lot of blue food coloring. Maybe you've been requested to make a birthday cake for a theme based on those Frozen movies, and you're going to need a lot of blue icing, and you want to make sure that when you go to use your blue food coloring, that it still has a nice taste to it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this lovely, look at that beautiful color. I'm going to take some of this lovely lavender liquid here, and I'm going to put this in a juice glass so it's very easy for you to see the transition that this will take on to turn blue. It'll be a little easier for you to see, I think, than if I do it in the bowl. Now, when you do this, whether you're doing this in your bowl or you've maybe transferred it to a juice glass or whatever the case may be, all you want to do is start with a pinch of baking soda, regardless of what amount you're working with. Just start with a pinch and keep working up till you get to the blue color that you like, never using more than that 1/4 teaspoon for this total amount of liquid. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. We'll put that little bit in. We'll give it a stir. I don't know if you can see that, but it's sort of become like a nice, it's starting to transfer to blue, and I'll put some on a paper so that you can see that. I'm just going to put a little pinch more in. I mean, really you need very little to achieve the blue color. Sorry about that. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to get a piece of paper and I'll put a streak on it so that you can see the blue. And this is a good thing to do when you are working through the process of turning this into a blue food coloring, to just come and test it on a piece of paper till you see that you're starting to get the shade that you want. This is still leaning a little more purple, so I'm going to continue to put a little more baking soda in. Well, I added a little more baking soda, and as you can see this, or I hope you can see this, it's really turned, the liquid has turned quite blue. And in testing it, it creates a nice pale blue color. But I find this a little weak in terms of the intensity of the color, especially since we're going to be using this as food coloring. So what I would do is take this liquid and reduce it even more. So I'm going to put it back on the stove, and I'm going to reduce this down to even less than 1/2 cup and turn it blue again. Well, I reduced this down a little more, from about 1/2 cup to about 1/4 cup. So now I'm starting a new batch, so to speak, and we'll see if we get a deeper blue than what we got from this first batch. And I think this will work like a charm. So we're just going to put our pinch in. And I know it might be hard for you to see on the camera. I took a little up-close video, and sorry, I think that clanks a lot, to see if I could show you that the blue in here. But it's hard to tell, I think, on the camera. But I'm just going to keep swirling this and putting pinches of baking soda at a time into it until it turns blue, and then we'll test it on the paper. Oh, this came great. Now you'll see that was our original blue, which is very pale, and it would be even more diluted, you know, adding it, you know, to an icing or something like that. Now we're getting a much richer, deeper blue. So I just put a little bit of all the colors on some paper here, and we've got the green from the spinach, we've got the pink or red from the beets, we've got the purple from the blueberries, and I'll overlay a close-up picture so you can see this, and then we've got the yellow from the turmeric. And then also we've got our blue that we started with what turned out to be a little too light. We reduced it more, and I did a couple of tests, and we've got a nice blue there. Now what I like to do with my homemade food colorings is store them in little glass bottles like this. Now you can use any kind of jar, any kind of glass jar that you have, or any kind of little glass bottle that you have, as long as it's got a nice tight fitting lid to it. And if you're looking for these glass bottles exactly like this, I'll put a link in the description below. They're just from Amazon. They're very reasonable. But anything you have around your house that's glass, I think storing these natural food colors in glass works best. Then it works best if you have a little funnel. Mine just kind of sits right on top of these bottles. It doesn't quite fit in, so I just try to do my best to keep it in there. And then I'll just go ahead and decant them. Well, I hope you'll give making homemade natural food coloring a try. And if you'd like to learn more about traditional cooking, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And then click on this video over here where I have a short playlist where I show you how to make evaporated milk and condensed milk. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.